church. Hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and looking forward to a great new year. I was writing my contribution check this morning and it dawned on me that's probably the last time I'll write one for 2019. It seems like it was just yesterday that it turned 2019, and here we are at the end of the year already, fixing to enter into 2020, the second decade of the 21st century. When you look back on the first decade of the 21st century and you think about all the events that have occurred in the last 10 years, the changes that have been wrought and all of that, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? And now as we look at 2020, as I wrote in the little Connect article, there's one thing you can count on for next year, and that is you don't know what's coming. None of us do. We can't predict the future. We can know who holds the future, but we sure can't predict the future. I mean, who would have thought, just think back, who would have thought that in 2019 we would have a flood like we had that would change the lives of so many people and drastically affect everybody for hundreds of miles up and down the river and in so many communities? Who would have dreamed something like that could happen? You just don't know what the future holds. Again, what's important is that we know who holds the future. And this morning, what I want us to spend some time talking about are principles that we need to live by in 2020. Now, as we come to the end of the year, I'm like everybody else, because we are creatures bound by time, and the new year presents a new time. We start thinking about, okay, here are changes that I'm going to make in my life. And we make these New Year's resolutions. And I've got absolutely nothing against New Year's resolutions whatsoever. The only problem I have with New Year's resolutions, and it's not a problem, it's just an observation. New Year's resolutions have a tendency to be very narrow, very specific. And in many ways, that's not a bad thing. But, you know, this year, my resolution is that I'm going to lose 15 pounds. This year, my resolution is that I am going to pray more. This year, my resolution is I'm going to try to be a better husband or a better father. And we're very narrow in our resolutions. And I really think, well, that's good. Though what makes more difference is the principles that we live our lives by, because those principles are going to touch all aspects of our lives every day. And so I'd like to suggest to you 5 biblically based principles that I would like to challenge you to allow to guide your life as we begin a new year in a couple of days. Here's the first principle. You can never go wrong doing what's right. Please hold on to that, because that is so true. And the longer I live, the truer that gets. You can never go wrong by doing what's right. In the book of Genesis chapter 39, you remember Joseph is challenged. Here comes Potiphar's wife. She tries to seduce him. He refuses to respond to her advances, and finally, in desperation, he literally runs away from her. And what's the result? The result is he gets thrown in jail, accused of sexually assaulting her, even though there's no truth in it at all. And some might say, well, but he did the right thing and look what happened. And I would say, yeah, he did the right thing and look what happened. He did the right thing. What if, just think about this for a second, what if he had succumbed to her advances? What if he had said, you know, I'm stuck down here, I don't deserve to be here, my family's turned their back on me, it appears my God's turned his back on me, why should I care? Yeah, you know what, if it's going to improve my lot, I'm just going to sleep with her. What if he had done that? Do you realize that the rest of the Bible wouldn't be the same? Do you realize how many people would have suffered had he made that decision? He did the right thing, didn't he? And I believe that wasn't an isolated incident. I believe here was a young man who made it his determination in life to do the right thing, no matter what the consequences might be, who understood you can't go wrong by doing what's right. That's why Potiphar didn't kill him. Because I will guarantee you that a slave accused of sexually assaulting his master's wife, there is no way he would have lived. No way. If Potiphar had believed that, he would have tortured him and killed him, I guarantee you. The reason that young man is put in jail is because Potiphar believes him, and so he doesn't kill him. But it's because he's in jail that he is then able to do all the things that he does that will save Egypt and save his family. You cannot go wrong by doing the right thing. Daniel and his 3 friends in Daniel chapter 1. Here they are, hundreds of miles away from home, locked in a foreign country, trapped in a situation in which they had no say. Now you say, well, they're kind of in a gilded cage though, aren't they? Well, yeah, they are. But what the Babylonians are trying to do is turn them into Babylonians. Strip them of their belief in God, strip them of their loyalty to His law, and get them to practice like other Babylonians practice. And they start challenging them about the food they eat. Well, why don't you eat the king's dainties like everybody else? Well, because it's unclean. They respect the laws found in Leviticus. No, we're not going to eat that food. And pretty soon, it's a big deal. I mean, the man responsible for their health and well-being is scared to death that if they don't eat the same diet that everybody else is eating, they're going to start wasting away and he's going to look bad. And so there's all this pressure on him. And what do? They stand firm. And they say, no, you put us on vegetables and water, and let's just see what happens. And of course, you know the rest of the story. God blesses them, and they end up looking better than everybody around them, and they'll end up in positions of authority in Babylon. They do the right thing under great pressure. They do the right thing. You can't go wrong if that's the case. Now, all of us are going to face challenges every day. Some of you in school, you're going to be challenged to cheat. I guarantee everybody is. Don't. Do the right thing. Don't cheat. I mean, if you didn't study and you're going to get a C instead of an A because you didn't study, take the C. Don't cheat to get an A. Do the right thing. At work, the boss wants you to fudge a little bit, or you can tell a story and sell that car, or you can cheat on your taxes, or you can do whatever. Do the right thing. In life in general, do the right thing. You can't go wrong. Eric and Ashley were telling me about taking their car into a place in Muskogee to get it worked on. And when they got the car back, immediately they could tell that it wasn't working right. Something was wrong. And so they took the car back. And the owner of the shop checked it over, and he said, oh, we messed up. This should have been done, and it wasn't done, and this was done wrong. Let me take care of it. No charge to you. We're going to fix this, and we're going to take care of this. And you know what Eric said? He said, from now on, guess where we're going to take our car to get it worked on? We're going to take it to that fella. Because even though he messed up, he owned up. He's honest. He's straight. He's going to do what's right. And in this day and age, that means a lot, doesn't it? Make a determination in 2020. I'm going to do what's right. You can never go wrong doing what's right. Secondly, remember, choices have consequences. Now, we've talked about this not that long ago when I was talking about principles in regard to raising kids, but I want to come back to it again because I think it's really important. Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom. Reading book of Genesis chapter 13, remember Abraham takes Lot. They get up there standing above the valley, down below the valley where the Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. And it's all green and beautiful and lush. And Abraham says, okay, pick. Do you want to stay up here or you want to go down there? And Lot looks down towards Sodom and he says, man, I want to move down there. And he does. And choices have consequences. This guy's life is going to get turned upside down again and again because he made a bad choice. He moves down into that valley, and you know what happens? He gets down in there, and his family is all going to be kidnapped by Mesopotamian kings on a warring expedition. And he and his family are going to be carried off as captives. And were it not for his uncle Abraham risking life and limb and everything else and coming and rescuing him, he would have been carried off and he would have been a slave for the rest of his life, stuck off hundreds of miles away from home. And then, of course, come the angels and the pronouncement of judgment upon Sodom and Gomorrah by God. And Lot escapes with his life, not his wife. Remember, she's turned into a pillar of salt, and his 2 daughters. And while their lives are spared, have you ever thought about the fact? What did he have left? Everything that man owned, everything that man had coveted and wanted and held on to and sold out for in order to get, he lost. It got burned up. He was left with nothing. Choices have consequences. In 2 Samuel 11, David takes a second look. We've talked about this before, guys. First look is on whoever. Okay? You can't help how somebody dresses. It's on them. Second look's on you. He takes that first look at Bathsheba, then he takes that second look. And he ends up committing adultery. Consequences? Man. I believe one of the reasons why we have the story of David in the Bible is to let you know, if you choose to revolt against God's will, if you choose to betray your relationship with Him and your relationship with others, buddy, watch out. Because the rest of his life is one long, ongoing disaster area. One disaster after another. He made a bad choice to take a second look. On the other hand, we've just talked about Esther a few months ago. Esther laid it all on the line, didn't she, for the Lord's people? I mean, remember, she tells Mordecai, I don't know, if I go in to see the king and I haven't been summoned and he's ticked at me or something doesn't go right, he could have me killed right on the spot, just like that. But she chooses to go. She chooses to put her life on the line for her people, and as a result of that, Israel is saved from a genocidal maniac named Haman. And to this day, as we've talked about, the Jewish people celebrate Purim. And they celebrate Purim because here was a woman who was willing to put it all on the line. A woman who made a choice and said, you know what? I don't care what happens. This is what I need to do. This is the right thing to do. You know, we choose to consume alcohol. We choose to smoke marijuana. People choose to have sex outside of marriage. Did you hear the other day, this fellow up in Canada lost $260,000 gambling. And he hired a lawyer to sue the casino because he's claiming the casino should have known that he was a drunk and that he had a tendency to gamble more than he should, and they should have stopped him. It's their fault. And I thought it was interesting. One of the commentators on the show said, oh yeah, they held him down and poured the alcohol in his mouth. He made bad choices. But in this day and age, we don't want to face consequences. We want to blame somebody, don't we? It's somebody else's fault. It's the casino's fault that I lost $260,000. Brothers and sisters, I want you to remember something. I tell myself this all the time to remind myself, because this is a truism. You are not the exception to the rule. People foul their lives up all the time because they're convinced that somehow they're the exception to the rule. Everybody else gets caught, I won't get caught. Everybody else faces this, but I won't face this consequence. I'm the exception to the rule. No, you're not. There's a reason why we call it a rule. That's because the vast majority of time, this is what happens. And don't think that you're the exception to the rule. Once we choose to do certain things, certain consequences inevitably follow. I would challenge you, choose. In 2020, choose. I'm going to tell the truth. Now, you can tell the truth in love, but tell the truth. Just promise yourself, promise your God, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to pray. I'm going to honor my vows. My word's going to be good. To the very best of my ability in 2020, I'm going to make choices that are good choices. Because you understand that choices have consequences. Thirdly, whatever you do it with all your heart. Colossians 3 verse 23, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. We had some friends over for Christmas dinner. He works as a machinist in a shop, only been on the job a few months. He's had a fellow come up to him the other day that he works with, and he asked him, why do you work so hard? Why do you work so hard? Joe said, well, because my boss pays me to do this job, and I want to earn my paycheck. I want to do the very best job I can. That's why I work hard. I'm a Christian. People notice. They notice. If you care about what you do, and in particular, when you have opportunity, if you can share with them, I'm not doing this just for me or for the boss or whatever. I'm doing this for the Lord. You know, you can never really fail. You really can if you give it your all. Let me give you a personal example. I am obviously not built to be a runner. Short distances maybe, 20 yards, that's about it. I'm not built to be a runner. I'm a bulldog. I ain't a greyhound, never have been. Big bone, big frame, big guy, not built to run. Years ago, I decided I wanted to try to run, and so I ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. And I entered a 10K race in Portales. There were guys my height carrying 60 less pounds than I did, and I was as light as I'd been in a long time at that point. I ran that race as hard as I could. I wasn't anywhere close to the front. The guy that won it had time to drink a Coke and towel off and cool off and visit and have a good time before I ever got there. And I want to tell you what, the last half mile, I hurt as bad as I have ever hurt in my life doing an exercise. I mean, it was put one foot, keep going, don't stop, keep one foot in front of another, one foot in front of another, lungs burning. I crossed the finish line, I was dead. I did not even come close to winning the race. But to this day, I feel good about that because I ran the best race I could. And I still feel good about that. I didn't get a trophy. I didn't get anything. They didn't give participation trophies back then. I didn't get anything. You know, I finished in the middle somewhere. And that was that. But you know what? I tried. I tried as hard as I could, and I found out what Dan could do. And there was a whole bunch of people who could do a whole lot better than Dan, but I found out what Dan could do. When you do it with all your heart, when you really put yourself into it, there's a reward there. That's a real blessing. Why live life with regrets and questions? Why live life with what if I'ds? What if I had tried that? What if I had gone back to school and done that? What if? Why live life that way? Why not grab hold of it and live it heartily and live it fully to the very best of your ability? Remember who you're seeking to please. You're not seeking to please men. You're seeking to please God. Don't you want to make God proud? I really do. When my parents were alive, there was never a time in my life when it wasn't important to me that my mom and dad be proud of me. I wanted them to be proud of me. And I want my Father in heaven to be proud of me. It would tickle me to death if the Father one day will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things, I'm going to put you over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord." What sweet words to hear from your Father. Let's live lives that make our Father proud. Live life, do it with all your heart. Fourthly, put first things first. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 3, as Paul talks about the gospel, he says there are some things that are of first importance. Death, burial, and resurrection, okay? As of first importance. This is what I want to share, because that encapsulates the basis of our salvation. The fact of the matter is that too many people make the mistake of majoring in minors, don't they? You see it all the time. Focusing on things that ultimately have no importance whatsoever. Our oldest son Adam has a fellow that he worked with at a plumbing business. This guy's never married, makes good money. Adam says, "Dad, he's the biggest sports fanatic I've ever seen. All he does is, when he's off work, is watch sports networks and ESPN. That's it. Doesn't pay attention to politics, just sports." He said he's amazing. He's like an encyclopedia. You can ask him, who won the Heisman in 2013? He can tell you. What team won the World Series in 1964? He can tell you. This pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers, what's his ERA? He can tell you. He said his knowledge of sports in general is just phenomenal. Phenomenal. How many lives is he changing? What difference is he making in the world? He's all tied up in a bunch of stuff that ultimately really doesn't matter. How many people are laying awake at night going, who did win the Heisman in 2013? There are so many things, so many ways in which we can make a difference, but we've got to put first things first. God, family, work, then play. But God first. Getting your priorities right is a running start on a successful year. And here's where we need to ask, what do you need to work on this year? When we start talking about resolutions, where do you need to change? As you look back on 2019 and you go, well, I need to work on this. Well, then work on that. Maybe that needs to get moved up from 27th to first place in your life because it's been in the wrong place. It's important that we put first things first. And finally, always remember whose you are. Acts 4 verse 13. I always love this passage. It's the reaction of the Sanhedrin to the apostles as they're speaking to them, and it says, and they recognized that they had been with Jesus. Being with Jesus changed those guys, didn't it? And when they were challenged about what they preached, what did they say? Well, we must obey God rather than men. They knew who they were. They knew whose they were. And it profoundly changed them. Acts 11 verse 26, and in Antioch the disciples were first called Christians. I do think it's important to note, they don't start calling themselves Christians, they're called Christians. These are people who follow Christus, or Christos, the anointed one. And they made it clear enough and showed it enough that people around them started saying, why are you doing what you're doing? Who is this Christus? To the point that they started calling them Christians. They started calling them Christians. Because they saw the difference their faith was making in their life. This isn't a term that they coined for themselves. This is a term that was given to them by the world. They're Christians. They remembered whose they were. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 and 20, Paul, in the context of talking about sexual purity, says, you're not your own. You were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. It's critically important in so many areas and aspects of our life that we remember whose we are. I'm not my own. When I became a child of God, when I was baptized into Christ, the blood of Jesus Christ purchased me back from sin, but the blood of Jesus purchased me. And just as much as that slave in the Old Testament who wanted to stay with his master would bend over and let his master take an awl and drive it through his ear and pierce his ear, and that symbolized that he was now this master's from here on. So we better have our ear pierced. I am serving one who purchased me with his blood, who bought me back from sin. I'm not my own. I don't have a right to tell him how I live. He has the right to tell me how to live. I don't have the right to tell him, well, these are the priorities I want in my life. He has the right to tell me, Dan, these are the priorities that you need to have in your life. Always remember whose you are. And so, in summary, principles to live by in 2020. You can never go wrong doing what's right. Choices have consequences. Whatever you do, do it with all your heart. But first things first, and always remember whose you are. May God bless us in 2020. May we follow these principles. May we glorify him. May 2020 in many ways be the best year of our lives. If we can help you in your walk with the Lord this morning in any way, whether that's to begin it in baptism or to continue it in sync with the Lord and the Spirit, if we can help you, won't you come? While we stand and while we sing.
Create in me